Ethan, Tarjei is back. He had to sit out the sprint in the pursuit due to the absolutely incredible depth of his teammates. And then he just comes back and kind of just like gives a big middle finger to everyone by saying, "This is my mass start." I mean, it's like you could not make a more storybook like situation of he's a champion of the past. He's a veteran on the team. He's getting pushed out by these young guys. And there's actually, from what I understand, there's a ton of controversy in the Norwegian biathlon community about Tarjei and his basically him not retiring, him continuing to take spots. And I mean, hey, if he's continuing to earn it, I mean, last year he came in second overall. So if he's continuing to earn his spot on the team, then I don't understand where that beef is coming from. But I mean, if he's getting World Cup start spots that he might not necessarily be deserving or earning, especially when you have this incredible depth, I can understand where there's a little bit of anxiety and frustration. But I mean, finally, the Norwegian Federation kind of puts his feet to the fire a little bit and says, "Hey, you don't get to start. We're keeping Uldal because he had an absolutely great start to the season, or a great World Cup portion of the season in Hagfeldsen." And he comes back, gets his one opportunity, sort of on like a technicality because he's in the top 25 overall. So he technically gets to start regardless of whether his team wants him to or not. And he freaking delivers like in a way that you literally cannot beat winning.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're talking about an athlete getting, it's time for them to, hang it up, think about retiring, when Tarjei is sitting in 11th overall, having missed out on the sprint and pursuit from this past weekend. But I mean, I think they kind of had to tell him like, "Hey, you get this one chance to prove that you can stay here. It's either a podium, flower ceremony, win, whatever their criteria was." I'm sure they're never going to tell us what the criteria would have been, but they gave him this one chance to prove that he can stay up here. And, for any other country in the world, I think getting second in the overall in the previous season should get you the whole next season guaranteed. But this is Norway we're talking about. So for him to come back and win the mass start and look like the Tarjei Bo we've seen and we've known and loved for the past like 10, 13 years, however many years it's been, was awesome to see. And he's someone that every biathlon fan enjoys watching and always wants to do well. But I think, we have in our notes here that some of the other Norwegians are now in the hot seat after Tarjei, proved that he can hang with the big dogs in this race. So I think we might continue to see shakeups on the Norwegian team the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, so you got to think, what was Tarjei thinking with Uldal winning the sprint, getting his first World Cup podium and win, winning the sprint. And it seems like the sprint was last week at this point. I mean, so much has happened between now and then. But yeah, Uldal wins the sprint. So he's like basically secured a spot on the World Cup for at least the next trimester, definitely the next couple of races. And so, yeah, Tarjei was really had his back up against the wall and was able to deliver. But yeah, kind of like what you said, Stronsheim now, I think he's in the hot seat because he was 55th in the sprint and did not start the pursuit for some reason. I think at some point Christensen's going to be in the hot seat. And I'm trying to recall how we ended last podcast because we had this discussion of, who do you bring to Le Grand Bernard? And I think both of us kept Tarjei and ended up pushing down or pushing out one, either Christensen or Stronsheim. But it was actually, I texted you right after we recorded that podcast because I saw the news as I was uploading the podcast that they decided that they were going to sit Tarjei. And so it's just really interesting that that's what they ended up choosing. But now, I mean, you got to believe Stronsheim's in the hot seat. And when we're looking down at the IBU Cup of who's going to replace him, I guess this is kind of hard actually because I got to pull up the the overall here, but you have Johannes Tingis, you have Sturla, you have Sorum, who's in 6th, Martin Uldal, who's going to be hanging out now. He's currently in 9th overall after 2 weekends of racing. Tarjei in 11th. Your 6th guy is either going to be Christensen or Stronsheim. And if you decide to just send Stronsheim back to the IBU, Christensen stays as your 6th. Nobody is going to get pulled up probably for World Cup number 4, which is in Oberhof. Nobody will probably be pulled up. Stronsheim will probably be sent back down. But then on the IBU Cup, you're going to have Johannes Dahle, Bakken, Sievert Bakken's back, Isaac Frey, and then Stronheim. Those 5 are going to basically be battling, I think, against either Christensen or Tarjei at World Cup number 4, Oberhof, to take a spot there. So, it's going to be it always is tough the first, couple of weekends of the season because you're like, oh, where are people going to land? Who should go up, who should go down. But now that we've had the first trimester under our belt, it seems like things are starting to shake out and start to sort of fall into place here. With Uldal, becoming secure on the World Cup, and maybe someone like Stronsheim or Dali Shevdal sort of filtering back down to the IBU Cup. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I'm trying to pull up the IBU Cup schedule to see. I think they go to Arbor next, and I believe that it's going to be the same weekend as the World Cup in Oberhof. See, Oberhof is January 6th through 12th, and Arbor is January 6th through 12th. So it's going to be the same weekend in the same nation. Actually, probably pretty close to each other. I don't know where Arbor is in relation to Oberhof, but I think it's in that same general region of the country. Okay, so it's a 4-hour drive. It's not super close, but but still, it's going to be interesting to see. But I don't know. So, of those 6 that I just named, really there's Christensen, Tarjei, and probably Uldal on the hot seat. I'd have to say Sorum too. I would say really the only 2 who are secure at this point are probably Johannes Tingis and Sturla Lagride. Of those 4, who do you think who's gonna be the odd man out after Oberhof?
I think the Norwegians are just going to have to continue to go weekend by weekend, and whoever has the worst weekend, gets sent down, and they get the next weekend on the IBU Cup to prove that they, can win down there, and then they'll get brought back up. Maybe. I mean, Dale Shevdal hasn't been brought back up yet. I agree. I think Bo and Lagrad I'm assuming that they're safe considering they're 1st and 2nd in the overall by a pretty good margin. But the whole Norwegian shuffling feels like it's almost like a panic because they're not sitting 1 through 7 in the overall right now on the men's side. They still have 4 in the top 10, but for them, that's by their standards and their history, that's not quite what they're used to.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I've been kind of feeling the same way. Like we just become so accustomed to the last couple of years of Norway just absolutely dominating that when I look at the overall, and we're going to talk about the overall, I think a little bit later in the podcast, but when you look at the overall and they're not sweeping 1 through 6 like they have in the past, it does feel like I don't want to say panic, but it does feel like there's a little bit of like, oh, what do we do? We gotta, something's gotta get better here, and there's not that just absolute dominance. You're seeing the French guys be competitive. You're seeing Sebastian Samuelsson be competitive with the Norwegians, even with Johannes Tingis Bo. And we'll talk about him a little bit more specifically later. But I don't know. It feels different this year. It's almost like, panic is not the word I want to use, but panic almost is the best word to use. It's like, what? Oh no, they're not going 1 through 5 right now. What's going to happen? It'll be interesting to see. Maybe sometimes it just takes some time to kind of move back into the season, get back into the racing, and I mean, I will say they have stepped it up. I mean, that sprint race at Le Grand Bernard here, I think they had like 5 in the top 10. They had 3 in the top 5, so 3 in the flower ceremony, and then Sorum and Christensen were 13, 14 in the Hochfilzen sprint. They had 4 in the top 5, and then 7 was Uldal. So I mean, they're not bad by any means. they're not like, they don't suck. They're still really good, but it's different. Maybe we just become so accustomed to the absolute domination that it's like, oh, this is not good look compared to how it's been in the past. So I don't know. We'll see.